We may live over 5,000 miles from Lincoln Financial Field, but what we lack in proximity, we make up for in the film study. And each and every week, we'll be bringing you in-depth film breakdowns from across the pond and the Sooner State. Welcome to On the Shane page. I am your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at Shane Haff NFL. And I'm joined by the Redcoat, Johnny Page. Give him a follow on Twitter at Johnny Page 9. Johnny, I was browsing Reddit this week, as one does, and somebody shouted out our podcast, and it was When It's Time You'll Know is the Reddit name. I'm sure they're a listener. They said Shane's Pin Pull podcast with that Redcoat is on the short list of great podcasts with really deep analytics. So I felt like I had to give it a call out there in the intro. Normally we'll call him BG End Zone Film Guru. It can go both ways. How you doing, Johnny?
Yeah, maybe we should make it a thing when I have a really bad week and get criticised a lot. I'll become the red coat or something. Yeah, that was one of the weirdest comments, but fair play. It was quite funny, wasn't it? Yes, I'm doing very well. Busy. This week has been full go, but it is so much nicer to break down a film when the Eagles win. I feel like week one's just weird. Like, we're going to get straight into it today. We're not going to waffle much, but like, full disclosure, like, I don't really know how much to read into week one every year. I don't know how you feel about it, but the field was awful. Players were falling over the whole first quarter. Like, even Hurts' first interception, you could argue, wouldn't happen if Saquon Barkley doesn't just completely fall over on the first play. So I sort of have no idea how to judge this game. But I guess all we'll do is we can say what we see from this particular game. And then we'll sort of keep an eye on things as the season progresses in terms of trends. But yeah, I'm doing well. I was like really emotionally invested in that game. And sometimes at the start of the season, I can be a little bit like, oh, I'll look for the positives, whatever happens. But I don't know why. I think it was a really competitive game. It was a really good game. I think the Packers are a really good team. And I just really, really wanted the Eagles to, as I do all games. But there was something in particular about being first week, watching a Saturday morning. So yeah, I am doing very well. How about you?
I'm doing good. It's always nice to record one of these after a win versus after a loss. So that's always good. I wish the 49ers would have looked a tad bit worse last night on Monday Night Football, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to the playoffs. So, yeah, I'm doing good. The weather's cooled off here, which is always a little bit nice. So nothing to complain about, maybe until we get a little later in the film at least. But let's go ahead and dive in. Let's start. Well, I'll ask you, do you want to start on the offensive side or the defensive side this time?
Yeah, this is one where I've got loads to say about. Probably both. Should we just go offense and do it in sensible order for once?
Okay, let's do it. We'll start off on the offensive side of the ball. I'll lead us off here. You guys that have listened to the show for a while, you know our normal format. We each have 3 takeaways on each side of the ball. We don't generally talk about them until we pop into the show here. So sometimes there's some overlap. Sometimes there's not. I'm going to lead us off here, and I'm going to talk about how the Eagles chose to attack the blitz. I've got 5 plays, and I'll run through these really quickly. They're on Twitter for those of you listening on the Pin Pull Podcast Network feed. Maybe you're not watching us live. That's totally fine. We'll try to talk about it in a way you can follow along, but the clips always help. And so this first one of the things I love about it is you see Jalen Hurts right there. After he raises his hand, he's pointing something out to A.J. Brown. He's making an adjustment on this play, which is a great step forward that we want him to make. They're going to throw the speed out route to A.J. Brown, isolated at the bottom of the screen. He's one-on-one against off coverage. Now, Hurts is going to get hit in the back by a free runner. I was glad they had an answer to the blitz, and A.J. Brown breaks a tackle and gets like 20 yards here. That's not necessarily the answer I would want you to have to the blitz. I'm a big throw into the blitz, not turn away from it and get hit in the back. So I would still rather see them just get this ball out to Devontae Smith quickly in the slot so Hurts doesn't take that hit. But it's massive progress. We roll on to the second clip here, and this time Hurts is just going to get the ball out really quick into the flat to Saquon Barkley. They run the orbit motion with Will Shipley, and now all of a sudden your cornerback, he has eyes on the tight end. So there's really nobody with eyes on the flat, and the ball just comes out quick. And, I mean, it's first down, and you only get 4 yards. But it's not a sack. It's not rolling out and throwing the ball away. It's a positive play. And how many times last year did we see drives get killed by a blitz and you lose 10 yards on first down? So I'll take gaining 4 any day of the week. On the third play, the Eagles are going to run mesh. And again, mesh is just dual drag routes here underneath. And if you watch A.J. Brown at the bottom of the screen, this is like teach tape on how to run mesh, because he puts the guy that's covering Dallas Goedert on the ground without even touching him, just right in his way, jumps out of the way, the guy falls down, and Goedert gets a big gain. So again, having quick answers. Johnny, there's a theme here. All of these throws are short. These aren't guys running deep. We're trying to get the ball out fast. This next one is perhaps my favorite, and it's just going to be Grant Calcaterra. The guy over him rushes, and he just turns around, and the ball's out immediately. Now, this looks kind of like a Kellen Moore special 5 curls, which he will run from time to time. Maybe this isn't a side adjust. I called it one on Twitter. Maybe it is. I don't know. But this is just, it doesn't get easier than that. The guy that's lined up over you blitzes, you just turn around and the ball comes to you. And again, this was here all last year, and the Eagles just never did it. So I like seeing that. And then the final one I'll show here, they're going to try to go back to this out route to A.J. Brown, and it's not there. One of the things I love is that the out route's not there, but Saquon stays into block. He makes a good block, and Hurts isn't under pressure, and he has time to come to his second read, which is Devontae Smith wide open on this drag route. And so I love just even the design of that. You're looking at the out route, then you have the drag route flowing into Fields' field of vision. I really liked what they had against the blitz this week. I tweeted out their splits for week 1 compared to last season. Hurts, obviously it's a small sample size, but the things that really stuck out to me was the air yards per attempt against the blitz dropped from 8.7 to 6.2. The ball came out 0.3 of a second faster. There were 0 tight window throws, 0 deep passes compared to 19 and 12.2% respectively last season. And Hurts diced up the blitz. He had an EPA per drop back against the blitz of over 1. That's a night and day turnaround. We said that the Packers should smash the blitz button and make the Eagles prove they could beat it, and that's what they did. So that checks that box for me in week 1.
Yeah, one of the weirdest things, Shane, I don't know if you noticed this, but the Packers didn't really ever send the house. It was one of the weirdest things. Like, they had all summer to plan for the Eagles, and it was a lot of like 5-man pressures. And I was sort of sitting there thinking, when I was watching live, I was like, I sort of expected the Packers just to go nuts, and they didn't. So in some ways, I'm like annoyed they didn't, because I'd have liked to have seen how Hurts dealt with it, and how the offense dealt with it. But yeah, there's no doubt, but like, it was night and day difference. And the things you mentioned is exactly what we said Kellen Moore would do. There's no radical ways of beating the blitz, and if there was, everyone would run it, and no one would ever blitz ever again. You have to get the ball out quickly. You have to protect. The first one I didn't like either, because Hurts got hit from the backside, which I'd rather not live in that world that often. But overall, like, the way Hurts looked, I think a lot of those plays you mentioned as well, in particular, I think it was the third one or fourth one where A.J. Brown wasn't open and Devontae Smith comes over on a shallow crossing route. One thing Kellen Moore does really well is he lines up a lot of routes in one half of the field. So he keeps the quarterback being able to get through reads quickly without having to go from right to left. And this is very common for a lot of modern day OCs. We've spoken about this in the past. The quarterbacks don't often read full field reads as much as maybe they used to. So I was really, really happy with the way they dealt with the blitz. I mean, it's sort of hard not to be. They basically diced it up, as you mentioned, and every single number that's coming out this week has been positive. I'll spin straight to my first point as well, Shane. And for those of you that are just listening, we probably should have done a little bit more of an introduction, because there might be some new listeners this year. We cannot cover everything every podcast, so we try and choose a few like important things that we want to focus on. Because if we tried to cover everything, this would be hours and hours and hours. I wanted to mention something that I wrote quite a lot about in the article for BGN, which is I called it the simplicity of Kellen Moore. And I'm only going to really show one play for this, because it's more of a sort of thought than something to look at in the video. I've said this before, but scheme guys online like us, and I don't count myself as a scheme guy in many ways, but the real scheme guys, like the proper guys who cover the league, they love nerdy schematic stuff, like the 1%, the Sean McVays, the Kyle Shanahans. They love it when a team really wins with scheme rather than talent. And I think because of that, the Eagles are never their biggest friends, because the Eagles don't win with scheme rather than talent. The Eagles win with pure talent. And one thing I was interested was when we looked at Kellen Moore from last year, we noticed some sort of weird play calls. Like, what was the famous one we broke down in that drive, the flea flicker tight end screen. And in a weird way, it's fun to look at. But I didn't want that. Like the Eagles don't need to do that. This Eagles offense doesn't need to be unbelievably good schematically because they have better players than pretty much every single team they will always play against. And I think in general, that's something that I was really happy to see from Kellen Moore. To be honest, there were times when, except for the motion, you looked at a few play calls and thought, it's not radically different from last year. It was a lot of motion, but there were some staple concepts. Yes, they involve motion, but there were still some down the field throws. There were still like very basic concepts I've seen the Eagles run a lot, which in a weird way I wanted to see. And my favorite example of this was we could all get creative. We could all talk about and I think you're going to talk about some of Kellen Moore's creative calls after me. But the biggest play of the game was AJ Brown. And it's clip 7 on my film thread. And I think probably the reason why the Eagles won the game was in part due to this play, because sometimes when we talk about scheme, it's not just scheming open a receiver. Scheme also includes just setting up your best players to win. So what the Eagles do on this play is essentially they don't isolate AJ Brown, but he's basically the only one running the route in the entire right-hand side of the field. They know he's going to get one-on-one because it's clear single high coverage. Now, they do a little funky shift, which I quite like, to get him outside Dallas Goedert. And I think a lot of what Kellen Moore does is just like window dressing, and he basically just wants to make you think post-snap. Whether there's any real purpose to some of these shifts, I think you'd have to ask him, and he'd probably tell you. But I think some of it is just literally the second before the snap, all of a sudden, their defense has to react to something different. So is that Jai Alexander? He's thinking that, AJ Brown is lining up inside Dallas Goedert, so that will maybe change the route. I mean, all of a sudden, last minute, AJ Brown's outside him, and that takes away maybe what you were expecting pre-snap. But this was something I liked. Like, it's just simple. There's nothing rocket science about this. Get AJ Brown to running out and up. Jalen Hurts throws a really nice ball. And then guess what? Most NFL receivers don't score this play. But AJ Brown can outrun everyone. And I think that was what I was really happy with. There was like just enough of a combination, I would say, between giving Hurts answers in the passing game, that is, and then also not being overly complicated. Like, as an example, I think Kellen Moore would love to get into more under center play action. But in this game, they couldn't run the ball from under center. We might come on to that a little bit later. So basically, it was like, well, let's ditch that. I'm sure he wanted to do it more. In an ideal Kellen Moore world, that would probably happen more. But you know what? For the Eagles, they don't need to. Because if things are working like basic run games and basic pass plays, you don't need to get overly creative, because the Eagles are basically going to have a talent advantage when they're all healthy, of course. I would imagine every single game they play this year. I do not think there are many defenses out there that have the ability to cover Saquon, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert, as well as dealing with the offensive line and Jalen Hurts. So I wanted to see Kellen Moore, like a hybrid Kellen Moore / Nick Sirianni. And I think we got that. It was Kellen Moore's offense, but it was relatively simple. And I view that as a positive, personally, rather than a negative.
Yeah, I think you said that well. I don't need to see a flea flicker tight end screen, but there are some really cool designs that I did like. And so I wanted to highlight a couple of those in my second point. And so the first one is the Saquon Barkley touchdown. And there's a few things I like about this play. So let's just talk about what they did first. They're going to run a double post. So we've got double post routes coming off of your receivers here. We're just trying to drive I think that's Johnny Wilson who goes in motion at the snap. So you're going to get the orbit motion, if I remember correctly. You get a double post. You've got guys going every which direction. They're going to run. It's not even really play action, but the left guard is going to pull over. I guess it is play action. The left guard pulls over to the right. And so he's trying to hold the linebacker just for a split second. Make him think, like, why is the guard moving this direction? That's who I'm keying off of. I think it might be a run. Meanwhile, you release Saquon Barkley on a wheel route out the opposite side. Usually you're not anticipating a running back running a vertical route opposite the side he's lined up. So there's a lot going on here, and it's all designed to try to get Saquon Barkley one-on-one running vertically against a linebacker. And it works in that respect. I said on Twitter this didn't work. I said it was a cool design that didn't really work, but it was a touchdown anyways, and I got some flack for that. But the reason I said it didn't...
You deserve that flag. It does work. You're being harsh. No. It's a good play call, and it's a good throw. Xavier McKinney sniffs it out, and I think it's a fantastic play by him. I think he's a great player. He sees what's happening here, and he just falls down because the NFL is playing on a crap field again.
and he can't get over there. I mean, if Xavier McKinney doesn't slip, this probably gets broken up, and we're still talking about this being a great design, great throw. It just didn't go for a touchdown, but it's a perfect throw. Saquon Barkley brings it in. I think it's a really good catch, and it's a touchdown.
Sorry, Shane, can we stick on that play for a little bit longer? Because it was my second point as well. So you pretty much nailed everything. There were just a few things that I really wanted to mention. So a couple of things. Firstly, I think the Eagles did the homework on the Packers, and they knew they played a lot of zone coverage. And this is also an example of a 4-strong play. So 4-strongs have sort of taken over the league the past few years. I remember Ollie Connolly writing about them about 3 years ago, and I've always kept an eye out for them. So what I mean by 4-strong is essentially there are 4 eligible receivers on one side of the field. Now, this is basically the same as what flood and sour concepts do. They flood the zone coverage. This has been going back for NFL history, essentially. But what they do is, if you draw up the play like you just drew it up, Shane, but 2 things I wanted to add was, firstly, you get Dallas Goedert coming on a shallow crossing route as well. And what I love about that is it basically gives Hurts like a built-in check down as well. So if there's pressure, you know that he can go to Dallas Goedert here. And Dallas Goedert's actually wide open, by the way. What this also does is you get all 4 receivers in one, essentially, field vision, whatever you want to call it, for Jalen Hurts. So he can read this 1, 2, 3, 4 really quickly. The double post is more of a sort of like an alert, I imagine, against a certain coverage. I imagine he reads it 1 to 2 in terms of he reads the wheel to the tight end. And the other thing he does, which, if I'm criticizing your skills on paint or whatever you're using there, Shane, Saquon Barkley doesn't run the wheel like outside of the tackle. He runs it through the B gap. And this is a trend that we saw around the league a couple of times. I believe Ben Johnson with the Lions ran a play like this. I was watching highlights of the Rams game, and they used Puka Nacua in a really cool design, by the way. They didn't score from it, so a lot of people probably haven't seen it, but it's an awesome design. They run Puka Nacua like in motion, and then as he gets like past the center, they snap it, and he ends up running through the B gap. And all of this is just making it really, really hard on that linebacker. So I think you nailed basically everything. The only things I wanted to mention was the B gap and also this sort of 4-strong concept and the way it gives Hurts so many different options. Last thing I want to mention on this play is that I think we take for granted how good this is by Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts. Firstly, this is not an easy throw. Jalen Hurts has to be quite careful in the pocket because of Landon Dickerson pulling, and the subtle movement is really good. Secondly, I think whenever people talk about running backs at the backfield, people forget a really big flaw, which is 90% of the running backs in the NFL suck at the backfield. Because when you spend your entire college career learning how to run, being able to go down the field and catch is a lot harder than people think. It's why people like Rachaad White, who it appears he can't run at all, can make a living as a starting running back in Tampa Bay because he's so good outside the back, catching out the backfield. Saquon Barkley is one of the rare running backs. I think you can argue it's him and Christian McCaffrey as like the 2 true foundation backs who could also catch like receivers. That is a really good catch. There are some great angles from behind the end zone view. And like that is not an easy catch. There's a safety coming charging or a cornerback coming charging towards him. He has to get both his feet in bounds, which how often do the running backs practice getting their feet in bounds, Shane? Like that's not a skill you expect running backs to have. So I just wanted to give a massive shout on that play as well. Not only is it an awesome design, designs are only as good as the players you've got. And it's a really, really good play by Jalen Hurts, but in particular by Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, the catch, I was trying quickly to see if I could find the angle of the touchdown catch, and I don't appear to have it handy, but the broadcast angle of that one was phenomenal for sure. And you mentioned too, just watch Jalen Hurts' movement here. We're starting on the hash, and Jalen Hurts is going to drift to the right, and this is by design. He's going to make the throw almost from the right hash. This isn't an instance of Hurts drifting in the pocket. He's supposed to do this because when you pull Landon Dickerson across the formation and it's not a run play, all of a sudden you're at a disadvantage blocking on the left. So I like that he just gets over, creates the space, and then plants and makes the throw. So you mentioned that. I just wanted to point that out on the video again. That's a really good footwork by Jalen Hurts, and it's a great throw, great catch, like you mentioned.
You want to carry on with your second point? Because I interrupted. That was essentially my second point, was just going to be that play. But I think there was another design that you really enjoyed. I think I know one you're going to call on because I highlighted it in the article as well.
Yes.
So do you want to talk to people through the other play that stood out from Kellen Moore's bag of tricks, should we say, this week?
Yes. So Yeah, Kellen Moore was in his bag on this one. You've got Will Shipley starts out wide and he runs orbit motion. And at the snap of the ball, A.J. Brown is just going to run a vertical route. He's going to try to clear things out. And Devontae Smith swings out in front of Shipley like he's going to block. And then as soon as the slot cornerback tries to fight through his box or through his block, surprise, it wasn't a block to begin with. It was just set up throwing to Devontae Smith in this void. And so I just really like this design. Hurts does a good job selling that pump fake. And then I think he does a really good job too, kind of sitting Devontae Smith down to give him a possibility to run after the catch. Like there's a world where you see the cornerback opening his hips to come back on Devontae Smith here. There's a world where Hurts puts this ball up the sideline and throws Devontae Smith into contact. He doesn't do that. He kind of sits him down, lets him catch it, gather it, and he gives him an opportunity to run after the catch. So again, I thought that was really cool design by Kellen Moore. We saw him come back to something similar later in the game, and it didn't work, and it's not always going to work. But I thought it was cool design. I thought it was really good execution by Hurts selling the fake, Devontae Smith selling the block, and then Hurts placing the ball where he didn't throw Devontae into contact. So I thought that was really cool as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, the Jalen Hurts ball placement. I think Hurts ball placement in general is really, really good. I think even like the A.J. Brown touchdown, we take for granted that he often throws these balls like exactly where they should be. I'm going to go off script very, very slightly, Shane, because we haven't spoken about Jalen Hurts like at all, really. And he wasn't one of our points this week. I feel like everyone sort of knows what Jalen Hurts did this game. He basically didn't play great, but also had some really clutch moments. And I don't want to go too deep because it's week one and the field was weird, but I didn't like either of the interceptions. We don't need to break them down because I think they're the kind of plays you can watch live and just go, yeah, that didn't really work. But I did want to just briefly mention that I think in general his ball placement is outstanding. And I have been criticized for being negative on Hurts this week, despite the fact I'm wearing my Hurts jersey as we speak. So I'm wearing that to get me some street cred back. But like, I'm not panicking. I think Jalen Hurts sometimes has those kind of throws in him. Like, I'm really, really not worried after 1 week. I think he still does a lot of things very, very well. And in fact, I think you could argue that the things he did badly in this game are things that I don't really worry about with Jalen Hurts. And the things that he did well, like throwing against the blitz, are things that we do worry about with Jalen Hurts and the ability to run an offense with motion. So weirdly, I think you can argue, even though he didn't play great, you come out of the game feeling a little bit better about him. I'm going to go to town, Shane, on my third point because it's my biggest one. And I know yours is another passing concept. So rather, I know it sounds like I'm making you do the work, but
before you
get
do
to your third point, before you can talk to me about Jalen Hurts very briefly if you want.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, I think you look at Jalen Hurts and he made 3 really poor decisions throwing the football. 2 of them resulted in interceptions. 1 of them should have been an interception. The decision making is usually not the concern with him. And all 3 of those are pretty indefensible positions. I mean, I saw Brian Baldinger trying to justify the throw that was picked off in the end zone, and it's a reach. You don't throw across your body late in the red zone. It's never ends well. I don't care that AJ slipped. That's at best probably an incompletion, still maybe an interception. So he made some poor decisions there. That's abnormal for him, like you mentioned. He did not read RPOs and read options out well. And I think that is becoming more normal. I don't know if the league's just catching up to that now, if they're just specifically looking for it against the Eagles. But I feel like those have been a struggle over the last year. I would like to see less of those. And he had a few plays where his ball placement wasn't great. But overall, I thought he played well. And especially when you look at like Jordan Love, who his ball placement was all over the place. I mentioned to you off air that I wonder how much of the ball placement issues that Jordan Love was having were due to the field conditions. I mean, we saw a few times he slipped at the top of his drop, not being comfortable. It didn't, regardless of if that's what it is or whether it was week 1 rust or whatever, it didn't affect Jalen Hurts as much as it did Jordan Love. And so I think Jordan Love's a really good quarterback, and I think he had a rougher game than Jalen Hurts did, even if it didn't result in a whole bunch, 2 interceptions. So overall, Hurts needs to rein in some of those plays. I thought the 2 interceptions were trying to be too aggressive in spots where he shouldn't have been so aggressive, I feel like. But being able to beat the blitz, being able to utilize motion, I thought he looked in command of those things. So overall, I feel positive. I don't want to see another couple interceptions like that, though.
Yeah, and before you go to your third point, two things. Firstly, I'm going to get into the whole RPO thing with my run game point because I've got a hell of a lot to say about it. And we have a good comment coming in from YouTube about Hertz's play against the blitz being related to his size. So do you think maybe throwing away from the blitz is because of Hertz's size? Like with all these questions, as much as it's a great question, I don't know because you'd have to be in the room. But I do think it's a very, very fair point. Like, not to just pick on Bryce Young on this podcast, but I think we're realizing that size matters when it comes to the quarterback position in the NFL. And Hurts is relatively small. Now, by modern standards, he's not. He's not tiny, but he is only, 6'1". I think pushing 6'2". I believe he was 6'1" at the combine.
Yeah, he was.
Right. And that stuff does matter. Like when you got two tackles that are absolutely ginormous in front of you and some pretty big guards as well, including Mekhi Becton, you are going to struggle sometimes to hit the layups, the short. And I think that's one reason why we know Hurts targets the outside the numbers, because those throws are easier for quarterbacks like Hurts. I don't know if that's like a specific thing. I think Hurts is still capable of throwing towards the blitz. I think that's probably just a philosophical thing that in that particular play, it was easier for him to go away from the blitz. And also the guy was quite wide that was rushing him. So maybe they thought he'd get out before he got hit. But it's a good point. And I think it's worth mentioning when we talk about Hurts that he is not the biggest guy. But yeah, I'm not worried about him at all this week. Like, it's something to watch out for, but it's more something to monitor, those kind of decisions where he was too aggressive. I don't think that's who he is as a quarterback. Right. Give me your third point because I want to go to town on the run game, Shane. So finish up with, I think you're going to talk about another concept that you enjoyed this week.
Okay. Yeah. My third point is just, I was going to call it our concept of the week, but Johnny already had the concept of the week. So we'll give you two of them this week. This one's a concept called Yankee. I introduced Johnny as a redcoat. Now we're talking about Yankees. I mean, Who knows where we're going to end up in this podcast, but Yankee is a really good, it's a really good concept to beat single high safeties. And so what Yankee is basically it's a dig route on one side of the field and there's a post route from the other side of the field. And so they sort of cross each other. And you're trying to isolate the single high safety. If the single high safety steps down on the dig, the post will be open. If he stays back with the post, the dig will be open, or more than likely he'll be non-committal between the two, and they're both going to be open. And they're both open on this play. And Hurts is going to throw the ball to A.J. Brown. And I've seen people use this play to talk about, well, he locks on to A.J. Brown, and look how open Devontae Smith would be. And he's running into a voided area of the field. And as JT O'Sullivan would say, don't screenshot quarterback. You got to understand the concept and what's being done here. So would it be better if he threw the ball to Devontae Smith? I mean, objectively, yes. Look at the window he's got to throw into versus this tight window throw. However, you're reading this concept out 1-2. A.J. Brown is 1. Devontae Smith is 2. At the snap, by the way the cornerback opens his hips, he is surrendering inside leverage, and you're running an in-breaking route. The linebackers were sucked up on play action. You've got a big void to throw this ball into. That's why Jalen Hurts throws this. It's not because he likes A.J. Brown better than Devontae Smith. If anything, people should be like, hey, he tried to throw over the middle of the field, and that's what we want sometimes. So I think it's a good decision. It's a sound decision. Ultimately, the throw is low, and I'll tell you why when we go to the back view here. So we go to the back view, and I'm not the QB mechanics guy. Okay, that's not my thing, but I think it's pretty obvious on this one. The mechanics don't matter until they matter, but look at where Hurts is lined up here. His feet are lined up over here, and he's trying to throw the ball straight up the middle. Where are you going to throw the ball if you're not stepping into your throw, if you're not getting your legs into it? You're going to throw it short, right? Hurts doesn't get the rotation. There's no torque on this. He's just all arming it downfield. Ball's short, right? And I saw people say, well, he was throwing it low on purpose. He's not throwing this low on purpose. There's not somebody closing down. He's got all this room to throw it into. It's just a misfire. The mechanics got sloppy, and it ends up an incompletion. And it happens. And maybe you want to tie that into field conditions and being uncertain at his drop. He didn't slip there, but maybe that's in your head. But ultimately, sloppy mechanics make him miss that throw. But the decision to throw to Brown there is sound because that is the first read, and he had proper leverage.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the analysis, Shane, until you started talking about QB mechanics. I'll make a promise to the listeners. If I ever have QB mechanics on this podcast, just ban me. I hate talking QB mechanics.
To be fair, I said they don't matter until they matter.
I know. I just hate them, especially with the modern NFL quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. They just do what they want and the ball seems to go where it is. You are correct. I'm sure QB guys would tell me that you are fully right, and it does look very awkward. But if he completes a throw, no one cares. Yes, you are correct. Right, I want to nerd out on something. Firstly, that is the best comment we've ever had, so thank you. I'm guessing his name's Matt Doherty, or is it Dat Moherty? I'm not sure. But that's a comment saying that they've never heard football being talked about in a British accent that wasn't ridiculing it, which doesn't say much for my fellow Brits. To be fair, there's not many of us on podcasts. Ollie Connolly is the best by a mile, but there's not many of us Brits on the podcasts. Right. I got too much to say about this, Shane, so I'm going to try and give you like a quick fire, almost like a bullet point style rundown of the Eagles run game. I'm probably going to just have the words run game in every single episode this year because, as those of you know, I love the run game. And I think more and more across the league, by the way, I'm being proven right because running the ball is becoming more and more important. I just saw a stat today that air yards are at their lowest for week 1 and they have been basically ever. Like, running the ball is so important. And let's go quick fire because otherwise I will be here forever. So first quick fire point is the Eagles' interior offensive line was awesome in this game. Cam Jurgens is a strong dude, Shane. He had some plays, which we might look at in a second, where he's tossing defensive tackles at the club. And that's cool because he's not a big guy. Mekhi Becton, stock up me for picking him breakout player of the year and picking Saquon Barkley as my offensive MVP on the preview podcast.
Hold on. We interrupt this podcast to bring you a clip of Johnny from last week's episode.
I think they might catch teams by surprise a little bit early on. A lot of counter, a lot of power. And I have a feeling that Barkley may just have one of those like ridiculous years that running backs can have. Is he going to be picked as MVP? No. But I'll make a case for Barkley where I think some people are still maybe overhyping the running back by committee. I think that's maybe what the Eagles used to do, but I don't think they're going to pay a running back top dollar money and not use him a lot. So I expect Barkley to do really well this year.
Let it never be said that I only clip the times that Johnny says that Johnny Wilson is better than George Kittle or that Sidney Brown is Buda Baker. I'll clip the times Johnny's right to. So there you go, Johnny. I'll give you your flowers for that one.
Yeah, I felt very good watching the game. We're not going to show loads of clips of the O-line, but Becton had a really good debut at right guard, I thought, especially in run blocking. The running game as a whole was fascinating, Shane, because I'm starting to have a theory on the Eagles, and it's a bit of a worrying theory. Every time last year they ran from under center, they sucked. And in this game, every time they ran from under center, they sucked again. And I don't know what that is. It like a trend? Do they just not practice it very much? Because we know Kellen Moore wants to do it, but like they just couldn't do it. And the other trend about the running game, Shane, is every single zone read, RPO style thing they do involving Hurts running laterally is a disaster. Like they really need to look at their run game because teams just know exactly what they're doing. They run like a linebacker scrape exchange. They'll have the edge crash on the running back. Hurts will keep it. And then there's just a linebacker staring right at him. Whether it's an RPO, whether it's read option, like it just doesn't work of late. And I did tweet yesterday, like, do other teams do this? I don't watch enough All-22 around the league. Do other teams like smash read option still? I just don't think it's where football is going. Like, I think we're living in a gap scheme world currently. Gap scheme is very good against these 5-man fronts we see around the league. I think the Eagles ran some duo in this game and they were really good at it. I just want to see like QB counter bash. I want to see QB draw. I want to see QB power. If they're going to run Hurts, I want it to just be designed QB runs. But the Eagles are lucky because it doesn't really matter what they do run game wise, Shane, because oh my goodness, Saquon Barkley was good. Like I was on team sign Saquon Barkley last year because I love running backs anyway. But even I watched a lot of his Giants film and I was like, yeah, he's lost a step. Like he can still be really good. He looks like peak Saquon Barkley. There was a couple of runs in this game, Shane, that I was like, oh my goodness. Like he could have had 175, 200 yards if he broke that long one. He was gone. And I think people underestimate his ability to get skinny. He's really, really good at getting through tight holes. He is really, really powerful. His leg drive is off the charts. I feel so good about the Eagles run game. And if Kellen Moore looks at that and goes, yeah, let's just bin that RPO read option stuff. Let's just commit to a downhill, like physical, tough, power, counter run game. Like this run game could go nuts because that offensive line was just moving people. A couple of examples I'll show very quickly because we have done a long time on the offense. And sadly, I've got a lot to say about the defense as well. So let's start with just a few of them. Film 2 and my thread. If you have not seen it, please check me out on Twitter and you'll find it. There's not too much to Barkley here. Just look at the blocks that the 3 interior offensive linemen get. Dickerson, his guy ends up on the ground. Juergens throws 93 out of the club. And Mekhi Becton also gets to the second level. Like, that is a serious lane for a running back.
That's a hole that Miles Sanders could have hit.
Yeah, if he's not stuck, bless him, with Carolina. Oh, my goodness. Imagine we're a Carolina podcast, Shane. That is brutal. The other ones I really liked are, I'll give you 2 more. Play 6, I really like, because I love this, because Cam Juergens basically helps Mekhi Becton out, tosses the defensive, I keep saying it, but he throws the defensive tackle literally out the club, like miles away. But I think he does too much. So he just totally fails to get back to the linebacker because he's just shoving. I mean, that defensive tackle, Shane, 97 goes flying. I don't know how much 97 weighs, but Cam Juergens shoves him like 5 yards. Like, that is ridiculous for a guy that moves like Juergens does. Linebackers unblocked. Saquon Barkley's like, yeah, who cares? 1-on-1 with a linebacker in the hole. And then the best run by
315-pound defensive tackle. Kenny Clark, one of the better defensive tackles in the league.
Absurd. That's absurd, Shane. That is the 300. Like, that is ridiculous. If Juergens can do that, and Juergens can do like the pulling stuff. Like, I mean, you guys, everyone who's listened to this knows I love Cam Juergens. Like, since that first preseason game, I'm all aboard team Cam Juergens. Then the final one, though, by a mile, play 9 on my film thread. This is the one that Saquon probably would have taken to the house for, like, I don't know, a 70-yard touchdown or something if he actually saw the safety going. Like, there's some nice blocks here, don't get me wrong, but this is just Barkley, man. This is the footwork here. He cuts off his inside foot the second time. Like, the vision, just to firstly, like, bounce it sort of outside, but just he reads the linebacker in that first hole. Like, that is so good. If you're not watching it, please watch the play. It's just a shame he doesn't finish it, and I think he's annoyed himself. Like, I was really mean last year, and probably a bit too mean to DeAndre Swift, and I was quite adamant, do not pay the man. When you're talking about the gaps in tiers between, like, elite and good, there's not a chance in hell DeAndre Swift's making this play, Shane. Like, this is a proper top 5 elite running back, and he looked quick. Now, next thing is, can he stay explosive for 16 games? Even me, like, team ban running back by committee, is a little bit like, maybe run Gainwell and Shipley a little bit more in some games that aren't that close. But if he keeps that explosiveness throughout the year and the Eagles can keep him healthy, this running game is going to be so much fun. I think they do need to look at the RPOs and the read option. We won't talk about that anymore, I think, because we've done enough on the offense. But if that comes up again in future weeks, that's something to watch out for, because defenses absolutely have a read at the moment on what the Eagles are trying to do with their QB run game. Is there anything else you wanted to add very quickly before the run game? Because I think we've got a lot to say on defense as well.
Oh, there's lots I could say, but we better move on to the defense. I tweeted some pin pull. I mean, I'm contractually obligated, given our podcast network name, to tweet pin pull runs. I tweeted a dart clip that I thought about tagging you in, but we can go ahead and move on to the defensive side of the ball. And we can start out on defense here with a player spotlight. Each week we put out to our Patreon members a poll about a player they want us to specifically watch in the game. And we put up some options for them to choose from. And this week it was actually a tie in the voting. Now, you guys don't be gaming the system here, because we're not going to guarantee we'll talk about both guys in a tie situation every week. But this week we thought, why the heck not? And so Quinyon Mitchell, he won on Discord. Zach Bond won in our Patreon website community, but overall it was tied. And so Johnny and I each took one. And Johnny, why don't you lead us off and talk to me about Quinyon Mitchell?
Yeah, firstly, if you like the show, please join Patreon, partly to support us, because Shane in particular does a serious amount of work for this. And secondly, because you get to vote and help sort of the show a little bit. So I don't think I've ever enjoyed a cornerback like rookie performance more than Quinyon Mitchell. And it wasn't because he was perfect. This is like a non-all-22 tape. I've just never seen a rookie cornerback stare at every single player on the other team every time the ball gets thrown near him. It was unbelievable. Like, the arrogance, overconfidence, whatever you want to call it, swagger, you name it. Like, he just did not care. And if you're a cornerback, we all know the Jalen Mills style. You have to be like that, because you are going to get beat. Basically, the first third down of the game, I think everyone saw it. It's my first thread on the film thread, my first clip, I should say, on the film thread. The Packers go after him, as you do. Rookie cornerback. The Eagles are playing single high coverage. They rotate from two high to single high because they did this all the time in this game, literally all the time. We might talk about that later. And Quinion Mitchell is one-on-one with Christian Watson, who is one of the most athletic, sort of freakish, long, rangy receivers. And Quinion Mitchell just flips his hips, runs directly with him. Anyone can run, though. Like a lot of rookie cornerbacks are fast, Shane. It's not 40 time. It's the ability to play the ball in the air, that ever so slight lean to push him out of bounds. That is so good. I mean, I love the way he stares at him. And in general, I think he just had an extremely good game. There are other plays. There are plays that probably people saw live, the pass breakup, when there was a curl route that was slightly thrown inside, but still the athleticism to break that ball was awesome. There was another clip I could have tweeted where he ran with Romeo Doubs on a drag route across the end zone and then stared at him for like 10 seconds, which was also amazing. But I've given you an example of sort of like a one-on-one look. My second favorite example is when he was in zone coverage and he was able to sort of get depth and still break up the pass. I have decided to accidentally quit my film thread. So if you've got it up there, you might be able to see it quicker than me. But it is number 5. You might beat me to it. So this is a really, really tough play for a rookie cornerback, for any cornerback, in fact, because basically the Packers are targeting him. It's like they're almost running like a 4-strong here themselves because they've got 4 receivers on one side of the field. Spacing's a little bit off at the low end of this, but they're basically running a vertical route to get Quinion Mitchell's eyes away, and then they're trying to throw the ball underneath him. Maddox does perfectly, and I think Maddox does really, really well here, but actually, I think this pass probably just gets complete because Maddox doesn't get a hand on it, and it does go over his head. So I think Quinion Mitchell actually makes the key play, and that ability to gain just enough depth where he takes away the deep route and still gets back to the intermediate route and plays the ball in the air is awesome. That was something he was really, really good at in college, but it's just really good to see it translate. And I put this in the film article that hasn't actually come out yet because I've just finished typing it before we start recording. And I said there are loads of vets that can see that instinctively, but can't flip their hips and then get back to the ball quick enough. What made Quinion Mitchell awesome was that he's reading it like not like a rookie, and then he's actually still got the athleticism of a young guy to get to it. I think rookie cornerback is the hardest position outside a quarterback to learn, basically, and the amount of rookie cornerback busts we seem to have seem like extortionately high compared to other positions. So he will get tested more. He wasn't perfect, but that was about as encouraging as a debut as you could basically ever have. And yeah, that came in on YouTube. I can't express how much fun I had watching him just stare at everyone after every play. It was basically like my favorite thing from the game was the arrogance just to stare them down. It was like Jalen Mills style, but the difference was Jalen Mills did it when the ball was like 5 yards overthrown and he was beat. Quinion Mitchell actually had good coverage as well, which made it even better. So yeah, huge stock up for, as Nick Sirianni kept saying, Q. Huge stock up for Q in this one, Shane.
Yeah, he was really fun to watch. He had a pass breakup on an out route that it's one of those, if the ball was perfect, if it was in front, it's a completion, but it was a little behind and he's able to break it up. He was responsible for a coverage bust later in the game, but he's a rookie and I thought he was really fun to watch. It really stinks as an offensive coordinator when you have a perfect play drawn up to put a defender in conflict and that defender's just athletic enough to not be in conflict and cover both guys anyways. And that's what Quinion Mitchell was able to do. So, like you said, huge stock up for him. Let's talk about another guy that's huge stock up, and that's Zach Bond. Oh, my goodness. I did not expect this from Zach Bond. Man, I'm just going to run through some. Well, first, he was so incredibly versatile in this game. He took 13 snaps on the line, 47 snaps in the box, and he even took 6 snaps in the slot. One of his sacks came as a slot cornerback, which is just insane. He played everywhere on the field. He never came off the field. And so I've got a few plays here that I just wanted to put out there. This first play, I'll try to circle him quickly, but he's right here. This is just a sim pressure. He doesn't do anything special on this play. I just wanted to show his versatility and how he was used. He sort of mush rushes and then spies on Jordan Love. And so he was used that way. Here, I want you to check out his run fit. The way he fits the run really well. He's going to attack down through the A gap, gets around the guard, and is able to contact Josh Jacobs at the line of scrimmage. So that's a good play. This is the one I was referencing earlier. So we're going to have Brandon Graham, like 45-year-old Brandon Graham, is going to drop into coverage. So the slot cornerback can blitz. And oh, by the way, the slot cornerback used to be an edge rusher who's now a linebacker, but is lined up over the slot, a guy named Zach Bond. And he's able to come and get a sack off of this. And I mean, you just had him everywhere. And I thought it was really cool the way that Fangio used him. On this play, he's going to have pretty good coverage, I think, on the tight end. So the tight end is just going to kind of chip on Nolan Smith. I don't know why you feel the need to chip on Nolan Smith, but he does. But he rallies down at the catch point and he makes a play on the tight end. So that was a good one. This one, just watch him fit the run. Like, I'm pretty sure he goes into the matrix at one point to get around a block. Like, look at this body control right there. Somehow gets around that guy and wraps up Josh Jacobs. Like, that's incredible. He's dead to rights here by this tackle, I guess it is. And he's able to just duck under him and get an arm on Jacobs. I thought that was really good. And then, of course, we have the sack on the last play. I guess he's like spying Malik Willis. I don't know why they had him spy Malik Willis. You would love for Malik Willis to run there, but he ends up with a sack on it and ends the game. Overall, I thought Zach Bond had a great game, really in all facets of the game. And I could not believe the performance he put together.
Shane, I think great game might be an understatement. It was like, I don't even know what it was. It was unbelievable. It was weirdly good. It was like too good. Like, I joked in the article, like, well, he's not going to carry on. He's not going to get 15 tackles and 2 sacks every week. Massive credit to Fangio and Howie Roseman for like projecting his role. I think you've already showed all the plays. So I'm not going to add to them because he was just fantastic in basically every facet of the game. I think what I love is just how versatile he is. But I always think versatility is overrated if you're not good at one thing. Like, I don't care if you can line up at slot or at edge if you can't fit the run. It doesn't matter to me. Like, oh, brilliant. He can line up at edge and he can rush a quarterback and he can do this. But it's like, yeah, but can he fit the run as an off-ball linebacker? And he did. He did that well as well. Like, Fangio watched that and gone, oh my goodness, there are so many things I can do with this guy. That versatility is so important. And I'm not going to talk about the Kobe Dean. Actually, you're going to talk about the Kobe Dean. So
I am.
Brilliant. I was going to say I think he deserved the shout out as well, but I will not shout him out. I will move on.
I mean,
I believe
he's on pace for 255 tackles and 34 sacks. You don't think he'll keep that up?
That would be pretty good. I think that we could say that was # better than TJ Edwards if he was. That would
legitimately win. Like, legitimately, that would win MVP.
I think that would win everything. I don't think there's anyone ever done anything like that. So I think yeah, what I'm saying is it's probably unlikely. I think we're going to talk about the same thing for our second point because we couldn't not talk about it. So I've been really positive on that Quinion Mitchell point. My next two were a bit depressing, so apologies. And there were some things in this game that I was like fully scratching my head about. So should we just go ahead and talk about like cover 3, Shane? What the hell were the Eagles running and who was the defensive coordinator? Because I have watched so much Nick Fangio footage or film, I should say, and what they were running, I have never, ever seen Nick Fangio do. So for those of you listening that aren't aware, and I'm sure you've got lots of clips of them. What Nick Fangio runs is he runs match zone. And what do we mean by that? It means that essentially defenders don't just spot drop. So old school cover 3, you just drop to a spot. And if a receiver comes in your zone, you essentially cover him. What Fangio runs is like a forward match, which is a little bit different, where you almost match up to receivers depending on sort of where they release and the route concept. It essentially means that match zone is a way of not doing exactly what the Eagles did on Sunday. Now, I don't really know where I want to start with this, Shane, because I've got so much to say about the Eagles zone coverage. So just really quickly, before we show some examples, because I wrote this in the article, I thought about this a lot. And sadly, like too much, my night last night in bed was laying awake thinking, what the hell happened? And why did they run zone coverage like I'm playing Madden 5 years ago and not that they've ever run under Fangio? So I've come up with 3 reasons for the film. The first point is, and what I did in the article was I gave a point and then gave a counterpoint as to why I don't think it's true. And I basically decided that nothing's true. So I have no idea why. So I'm hoping you can save me. So I said point 1, reason why he did it, and this actually came from Honest NFL, who we know tweets a lot about schematic stuff. He said the field must have been so bad that Fangio changed up his calls because it basically helps the players with their footing. I don't see that, because surely you practice cover 3 before the game. You can't just run out and go, oh, the field's bad, let's play standard cover 3. Like, you have to rep this stuff. So I don't think that can be true. Second one, he had loads of new starters, so he wanted to keep things really simple for them. Again, don't really get how that's true. Reed Blankenship, Darius Slay, Avonte Maddox, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, they've all played in a Fangio-style defense before. Zach Bourne has, the Kobe Dean has. Like, basically the entire back 7 have played in a similar style. So why does that keep it simple for them? If anything, it doesn't keep it simple because it was terrible anyway. And then the third reason is just Fangio has decided he now runs standard covers 3 without match elements. And I just wrote in the article, that doesn't make any sense, because that goes against every single thing about the Fangio philosophy I've ever learned over the whole summer, when I did like the biggest deep dive in Fangio and didn't write about standard cover 3. So before we even get to the film, do you have any idea why they just started running standard spot drop cover 3 without any match principles like multiple times in this game? Because I feel like I was going a little bit mad watching the film. Like, it just didn't look like what I think Fangio is trying to do.
Maybe somebody Vic Fangio is an old school guy, and he came up in an era where there were 4 preseason games. Maybe he just thought this was the last preseason game, and so he was keeping things vanilla. I mean, we know he wants to play his starters in the preseason, so that wouldn't have been a red flag. Maybe he was just like, yeah, this is the last preseason game. We're going to keep things vanilla. Now, I have no idea. Maybe it has something to do with Isaiah Rodgers getting scratched, but that doesn't make sense either. I really couldn't tell you. I have no idea.
Should we get into some actual film? Have you got film on your end, or do you want the clips that I've got to look at?
Yeah, I've got a couple, but you can give me yours too. As you look for your number here, we had a comment come in on Twitter asking if this will be on YouTube later. Really enjoy it. It will be. You can check it out on my YouTube at Shane Half NFL. It'll also be on podcasting platforms, YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, under the Eagles Pinpole Network. So be sure you go check it out there as well.
Right. Awesome. They may be the same clip, Shane, so we might repeat ourselves, but let's just go through them anyway. Let's start with a touchdown. So should we start with the deep touchdown? Because this was the first time that I think everyone mentioned it. If you want my thread, because it's easier for you, it's film clip 6. I'm not actually going to blame anyone for this play, the deep touchdown, because basically, unless you're in the defensive back room or the defensive meeting, no one has any idea what's happening here. So if you just pause it now, Shane, for a second. Matt LaFleur basically realized the Eagles are running spot drop cover 3, and go back in time 5 years. Sean McVay is wrecking the NFL. Teams are running old school cover 3, and Sean McVay is repeatedly running deep crossing routes over and over and over again. And basically, half the league turns to Fangio because his defense is made to stop this route. Like, Fangio's defense is basically to stop deep over routes. I swear, like, that's one of the best things about Fangio is they take away this route. And so in this play, there's loads of ways you can see it. It's not Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's fault. There's no way he is meant to carry this as a deep safety all the way over. So it could be Darius Slay. He could sink deeper. The problem with Darius Slay sinking deeper is Cooper DeJean doesn't really get out in the flat. So I think Darius Slay is stuck on the flat. So it could be Cooper DeJean's fault. It could be Darius Slay's fault. It could be Nakobe Dean's fault because maybe he's meant to carry the guy going over him. But if Nakobe Dean carries him, you know what that means? It means it's a match principle. This is just literally standard drop. I mean, pause that, Shane, for a second, like as he catches it. How many times have you watched a Fangio defense look like that? Like, that is everything about Fangio's defense is to not, but Shane, it looks worse. Go like in the middle. There's like 3 deep guys and 2 Eagles deep defenders. Like, it's everything Fangio's defense is meant to stop. I mean, we don't even talk about the other guy being totally wide open in the middle of the field as well. That is like, I struggle to understand what the hell is going on, because that is like exactly what it's not meant to be. It's so weird.
It really seems bad to have 20 yards of the field about 20 yards deep by about 50 yards across with no Eagles defender in it.
Yeah, and then people kill Chauncey Gardner-Johnson for missing the tackle. Listen, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson will miss tackles. Life goes on. That's not his game. This is wide open to Jalen Reed. Like, that's a very, very hard play. So is there anything you wanted to add about that play in particular before we look at a few other examples?
Yeah, I was just going to say, from the things I know of spot drop cover 3, this is unless there's some specific check called, which probably should be called here, Nakobe Dean would be responsible for carrying that. And that's just never going to end well. It's one of those, if I know what defense you're in, I can draw something that beats it for a touchdown no matter what. I mean, it doesn't matter what defense you're in. I can draw something that beats it up if I know for sure beforehand. And so it's the right call against the right defense. And maybe the check was supposed to happen and not communicated. And I don't know. It's a mess. And it wasn't the only one like this, but there was a lot of coverage breakdowns in this game.
The Eagles just kept running cover 3. I'm laughing explaining it because I've like confused myself this week. I've had a lot of Friday night games are bad because I've had too long to sit on this film. Like I watched a lot of this Saturday and I've been sitting on it for like 3 days. And then the clip 7 on my film thread, Shane, it's literally the same thing dressed up differently. So what Matt LaFleur does is he runs a very short route on one side of the field and then runs a crossing route going to that side of the field. So Quinion Mitchell, in this case, not Darius Slay, gets sucked into the short void. Avonte Maddox is like half running with him, but he's not really running with him. And he's just wide open again. Like you can tell Maddox isn't really meant to follow him. It almost seems like he's like, oh no, there's no one here, and ends up chasing him. He's not in like man coverage. He's not really matching this because he's very far outside. Luckily for the Eagles, it isn't complete. And then I'm sure you might have a few other examples. I'll do one more. There is one later on that's a little bit different. So this is clip 11. Now, I think this might be a form of match, this one. Like, the reason why I think there might be a form of match is because just watching the way some of them play it, it looks like maybe they're trying to match this because I think it's Quinion Mitchell in this case who the announcers blamed because he chases the shallow route and then tries to peel off. But, like, there's just no one there. Like, it's the same play. Matt LaFleur is just running the same thing and designing it up in the same way. We got a comment on Twitter as I'm talking from Sam K saying, what's the deal with so much single high on 3rd down? And Sean Desire did it last year. That's what terrifies me, Sam, is Sean Desire's single high. How much did we talk about Shane last year? It was a disaster. Their cover 3 stuff isn't good. Like, Sean Desire's cover 3 stuff was horrendous. What made Jonathan Gannon really good, although people don't like that, me saying that for some times, was their quarters, whatever you want to call it, quads, was just elite. Like when there was like barely any cover 6, barely any cover 8 in this game, barely any quarters or quads. There's just so much single high. I haven't seen the numbers yet. I'm sure that Cody Alexander of Match Quarters will post it when it comes out, and I'll look at his Substack for it. But I would imagine the Eagles played a lot of single high. And long story short, like, we've gone on too long already, and I've still got to talk about the run fits as well, which I'm not very happy about. But they just didn't have any answer at all to basic deep overs, crossing routes, whatever you want to call them. And Matt LaFleur could have run it more, I think. Like, it was weird. Now, Fangio wasn't terrible because he had some really nice simulated pressures. You mentioned one earlier on was Zach Bourne. I think his red zone stuff was really good. I think in specific situations he was good. But it was just weird. Like, I don't really know what else to say. I said this in the article, like, I don't have an answer for why they ran spot drop zone. I don't know, but it was odd. Is there anything you wanted to add so I'm not going just mad repeating myself?
Yeah, that last one, I think that's cover 3 match, and that's on Quinion Mitchell for not getting depth. So I would put that one on him. Hey, he's a rookie making his first start. You're going to have some of that. But generally, we saw a lot more spot drop than I expected in this game. I do not expect that to continue, especially given how it went. But I'm not really sure what was behind it. I'm going to stick with my answer of 4th preseason game. That's my official answer. Let me get on to my last point here. I want to talk about Nakobe Dean, and then we'll throw it to you to finish us up. So Nakobe Dean was rated, I believe it was, as the worst player on the field for the Eagles by PFF.
Yeah, PFF has got like serious problems, Shane. Like, and I'm not even joking when I say that. Like, I know there was an article written by, who's the great guy with a Substack, who writes about lots of sort of political / football things. He's anyway. There's somebody who wrote about a wide left Substack. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
About like what's happened to PFF. Like their gradings have become shambolic. I used to use them as like a tool. Now I'm starting to wonder if they're just not even worthy of looking at, because to grade Nakobe Dean as badly as they did. And by the way, Saquon Barkley graded lower than Kenny Gainwell as well. like there's just no. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. Get back to the Kobe Dean. But
I think Jalen Carter was the second worst player on the field per PFF. So I put those rankings out like I always do, and people were really mad. And so I had to tweet out a clarification that I tweet PFF graphics or PFF ratings. I do not endorse, nor do I assign them. So don't shoot the messenger. But I wanted to talk about Nakobe Dean and tell you what I saw from him. So I've got 4 plays here that I'll run through briefly. The first one, we've got Nakobe Dean. He's lined up in the right B gap. And again, if we letter the gaps, we've got the A gap is between the center and the guard, the B gap, the guard and the tackle. The C gap is outside the tackle. Nakobe Dean is in the right B gap. He's going to make a play on this run that is headed through the left A gap in the backfield. That he's going to make a play in the backfield on a run that is 2 gaps away from him. That's incredible athleticism. So he's able to quickly jump in at the snap, wrap around, and he hits Josh Jacobs in the backfield. That's what he is so good at that. Sometimes he will get washed out of runs completely because he's so aggressive and because he tries to get around contact. But when it works absolutely. People say that Nakobe Dean is really bad in coverage. I don't think that's the case. I'll show you an example why people think that. But this one I think is a good rep by Nakobe Dean in coverage. And so Nakobe Dean is right here on the goal line. And you're going to have Christian Watson. It's not really a drag route. He's going to kind of like come in and then go to the back of the end zone. So what Nakobe Dean does here doesn't actually accomplish anything. But just imagine this is actually a drag route like it looks like. Rather than letting Christian Watson cross his face, he jumps in front of him. And he's forcing him to go behind him where he has help from Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. He's not going to give up this easy completion. That's really good instincts. And like I said, ultimately the play was designed to get to the back of the end zone anyways, but Nakobe Dean doesn't know that. And so I thought he played that one really well. This is a play that people will point to and say Dean is bad in coverage. It's play action. And he's going to bite on this play action. And it's nice that he's standing right next to Zach Bond so we can sort of compare the two's reaction to play action. And so you see they're both starting about the same spot. They're between the 41 and the 40-yard line. But look how much further up Nakobe Dean bites on this play action. By the time they both start bailing out, Zach Bond has gained 2 yards more depth than Nakobe Dean. Nakobe Dean also does not pick up this tight end coming across the formation, which as far as I'm reading this out right, that should be his guy. And he just lets him go and then has that moment and it turns into a big play. So again, he wants to be aggressive, shooting gaps in the run game. And generally it works pretty well. Sometimes that over-aggression can be used against him. And then this last one, Johnny, I have not seen a hit in a football game this hard without drawing a flag in quite some time. The way he recognizes this screen and blows it up with a legal hit. I want to reiterate that this could be flagged as a defenseless receiver. He could lower the crown of his helmet. He could hit him in the head. He does not, but he blows this play up with a legal hit. Just really good instincts. And so I really liked what I saw from Nakobe Dean. I know part of why he was graded so badly, I think PFF assigned the Jaden Reed touchdown to him. And so that maybe hurt some of it. But I thought Nakobe Dean played really well. Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond should be the starters when the linebacker core is fully healthy, at least as of right now.
Yep, I fully agree. And if they have assigned that touchdown to him, unless they have Vic Fangio's number, then I am not sure how they can do that. Right, I'm going to end with something that I found a little bit odd. And there are some, I'm a big Fangio guy, mainly because it's an easy defense for me to talk about because I know it quite well now, selfishly. But I love some of the simulated pressure. I love some of the quads, cover 6, cover 8. But I'm becoming a little bit concerned the last few years, not just with his stuff, not just this game, with some of his run fits. And I spoke about this on Twitter quite a lot. And there was just some really odd snaps in this game, Shane, that I wanted to get your opinion on as well. So I'm going to show you a few run fits that I really didn't like. And they keep doing this thing. And the first one I'll show is clip 3. And I also want to throw this out there because I put this in the BGN article. The Packers have the second best EPA per rush in the league this week. So basically, the Eagles defense was pretty terrible against the run. I saw people moaning at Chauncey Gardner-Johnson again for this missed tackle, but They do this thing with their defensive tackles where they just charge, and some people call it slanting, some people call it stunting. It's like an aggressive change-up because Fangio is normally quite passive. So they do this as a change-up. You try and catch for the offensive lineman out because they're used to Fangio's defense playing a gap and a half. And sometimes they'll just charge upfield. But it's like, if you guess wrong, you're screwed. It's a really interesting way of playing defense where, like, I don't want Jordan Davis doing that ever. Like, that is not how I would use Jordan Davis at all. For those of you watching, you can see Jordan Davis just charges upfield. And I saw some people criticizing Jordan Davis for this. I'm not Jordan Davis's biggest fan by any means, but this is not his fault. Like, this is how he is told to do this. I won't bother showing any other examples, to be honest, but let me just say that happened multiple times. And all it takes is when you slant like that or stunt like that, if the offense runs the ball the other side, then you're screwed. And the Packers realized this, and they just kept running outside. They kept targeting like C-gap. They kept running like with a pulling guard because they realized that they could basically just catch the Eagles out. And then there's one that I really, really didn't like. Clip 10 on my film thread. So there are a lot of things I want to talk about with this one, but one of the cool things about Zach Bourne is you can put him at edge. One of the bad things about Zach Bourne is that you can put him at edge. Because when Zach Bourne goes to edge, if you just pause this, Shane, before the play, they put Zach Bourne as like the fifth man on the line of scrimmage. Now, because the Eagles play two linebackers, that basically means that they only have one off-ball linebacker. Now, the Packers realize this, and they use a nub tight end formation, which, by the way, I've spoken about nub tight ends a lot because Sean Desai was killed by offenses doing this at times. Because what it does is it brings your cornerback into the run fit because there's basically no wide receiver on his side. Now, whether the Kobe Dean screws this up or it's Fangio's call, I don't know. Let's just hypothetically say that the Kobe Dean is meant to do what he does. So the Kobe Dean follows the motion to the right. Now, if you just pause it there for a second, Shane, look at this from a pre-snap look. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 defenders in the hole. All right? In the box, should we say. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The only one who is like off the ball is Quinion Mitchell. And it gets worse. Not only is there no off-ball linebackers, Josh Sweat is at 4-eye because he has moved inside to accommodate Zach Bourne going to edge. So it's now 6-on-6. It gets worse. Because you're running, again, outside, you can leave the edge defender unblocked. So now you are 6-on-5. This is 1st and 10. So I will repeat. This is 1st and 10. There are 6 blockers and 5 defenders. One of them is your cornerback, and one of them is your edge defender who's not great in run defense, playing at 4-eye. Jordan Davis can't do anything laterally. It's not his game, so he's not a particular use. Add in your only deep safety being Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who misses another tackle. And this has every single, like, drawing of an absolute nightmare for the Eagles. And they managed to get back, actually, and stop it. But another day, another running back, who knows? This could break for an even bigger one. I don't really have a lot to say about this because I'm a bit like, well, Fangio knows. He knows a lot more than me. But you can't have a run fit on 1st and 10 where you're 6 versus 5. I know I've heard of light boxes before, but you can't be 6 versus 5 and one of them be a rookie cornerback and one of them be Josh Sweat as a 4-eye. Like, that cannot happen. And as I mentioned, the Eagles defense did okay overall, and they held some really important moments. But the Packers offense had a lot of success, still scored 28 points, and EPA per play, they were the second best run attack this week. So I think the Eagles have quite a lot of work to do on their run fits. They need to maybe stop this slanting, stunting business so often with Jordan Davis. And they also need to make sure that they have the numbers at least on 1st and 10 to not be caught out like that again. Because that player, when I was watching it, I was like, this is pretty bizarre. This is not good, sound run defense at all.
Yeah, the first one, if you are going to slant your defensive tackles, at least do it away from the running back. Like if you're in shotgun and the running back is to the right of the quarterback, 9 times out of 10, he's running to the left. So if you're going to slant, you should at least be slanting that direction. Like the first clip, the first step of the defensive tackles just makes it super easy to seal them off and get upfield. That second one, I'm just going to assume that somebody messed up, and that's not the way that was supposed to be played. Because if that is the way it was supposed to be played, it just doesn't make any sense. Like maybe if it's 3rd and 10, maybe even not then, because that'd be an easy run to check into on 3rd and 10 and get a first down. I mean, it goes for 30 yards because there's just no way to stop that. So I'm going to assume the second one was a mistake. But I guess it's something to keep an eye on over the next couple of weeks if the Eagles are able to fit the run while still playing a lot of too high shells and light boxes.
Yeah, and Shane, just quickly, final thing on this. So I mentioned this already. The Eagles had the second worst rush EPA against them. So 0.247. There are only 3 teams above 0.2. That was Kansas City, Philadelphia, and the Los Angeles Rams, who were disastrous, 0.322. So without Aaron Donald, it isn't great. Let's take those 3 teams, though, right? So 3 teams. The Eagles and Kansas City were basically the same. Now, the Eagles were technically the second worst. But here's what's interesting. EPA, they were the second worst. But listen to the rush success rate. So 66% of the runs were successful against LA, which is a lot. 65% of the runs against Kansas City were successful, which was a lot. And by the way, it won't surprise you, those 2 teams were the worst 2 teams in success rate. So they were worst and 3rd worst in EPA and 1st and 2nd worst in rush success rate. The Eagles, on the other hand, were 45% success rate. So they gave up basically a lot less successful runs, but their EPA was still really high, which what does that tell you? It tells you actually their run fits could be really good. It was just 1 or 2 occasions. They were giving up only a few big runs. And I'm pretty certain, because I watched every run play, that nearly all of them were either terrible run fits like the last one where they didn't have the numbers, or where they slanted defensive linemen. Because the other huge run they gave up on the touchdown, they also did a weird thing when Nolan Smith jumped inside and was totally out of the play. And it was another example where Zach Bourne was at edge. So I think that's worth noting that, yes, their EPA was terrible, but their success rate wasn't as bad, which means that it wasn't just the run defense sucked all game. Don't get me wrong, the success rate's not good. They're still 25th. So they're not top 10 or anything, but they're nowhere near as bad as LA and Kansas City. But that means they're giving up big runs. And I think Fangio's whole thing is about not giving up explosive plays. I think that can't just be about the passing game as well. You have to look at it against the run as well, because the run defense let them down this week. And the Packers are a really good offense and a really good running game. But we've seen around the league, there's some good running games out there and teams are running the ball more. And it's something I think they need to look at moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is going to about do it. We said we were going to be under an hour, and here we are at an hour and 12 minutes. But, you kind of knew it's been a long time since we got to dive into the film. I won't say it'll be shorter next time, because it probably won't. But those of you that are listening all the way to the end, we do appreciate that. Johnny, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts for the people?
No, our job is to break it down. So there's a few negative points for me this week, but overall, I love the game. I love the Eagles win. And a lot of the negative points I mentioned are because I sort of want to see how they develop over time. So, apologies if I had a few negative ends. I realized I ended on cover 3 and then run fits, which is not the best way of ending. But they are things I'm going to be looking out for. So, hopefully we will see some more positivity from the defense over the next couple of weeks.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of On the Shane Page. Those of you that are watching on Twitter or YouTube live here, we appreciate you guys. Be sure you go check out our podcast feed, Eagles Pinpole Network. We've got 6 long form shows a week that are coming out, and we just launched a new daily show this morning. The Eagles Checkdown with Phil Stiefel. He's going to give you 5 to 10 minutes of Eagles news each morning on your way to work, or Johnny for lunch break for you, for our international friends. But be sure you go subscribe to that. That really helps us out. If you want to support us additionally, you can certainly do that through our Patreon, patreon.com/On the Shane Page. You'll get an ad-free version of the show. You'll get access to our player spotlight polls and some other perks that we're working on. So we really appreciate you guys. Follow us on Twitter. I'm at Shane Half NFL. He is at Johnny Page 9. We've got all kinds of clips and things up. I'll be tweeting out stats for the Falcons matchup starting tomorrow. Follow Johnny's great work on bleedinggreennation.com. He writes up the film threads. He writes up concepts of the week. You need to go check that out. And I think that I'm out of things to plug now. So we're going to get out of here, and we will catch you guys next week for another episode of On the Shane Page.